Hello, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. I'm a big fan of Kiss Looms. I greatly enjoy mine, and I am cooperating with Kelly at Kiss Looms to make you a playlist of all the basic techniques that you might ever want to know on all of the looms. So welcome and enjoy.
Let's talk about lifelines. They're knitting insurance, sort of. Ways to keep the stitches together if you make a mistake up here and you decide you have to rip back, but you don't want to get confused. As you see, I'm knitting lace. One row is every alternate row, something else happens, and it would be very hard to figure out where to stop ripping, especially if I were doing this across a big expanse rather than this dozen stitches or so. Here's a lifeline I didn't need, and when you decide you don't need it, you can just pull it out like that, and it's as though it never was. So it does no harm, it just takes a minute to put in. So let's see how that got there. I actually put it in using this very stiff double-eye needle, and I think it's going to be a little bit better to use a nylon needle or a plastic one, because see, this is a little bit more flexible. Now we can't actually, conveniently anyway, work into the present row on the loom, because that will put my lifeline in front of these pegs. That will later be a problem. So I've decided the simplest way for Kiss knitters to do this is to go into the previous row. There's my first stitch, down, up, down, up. As long as I catch every stitch, I'm good. Down, up, that's into an eyelet, but that'll be okay. Down, up. Time to get a hold of the end of the needle. Note that both of the yarns that I've chosen to use for lifelines are contrasting colors, and that's quite important and a big help. You can imagine how confusing it would be if I had purple yarn and I'm trying to rip back stitches to my purple yarn. But there, this one's in place, and yes, this cheap plastic needle. There are nicer ones than this, and there are some with curvy tips, which might make it even easier. That was very easy compared to the steel double-eye bodkin, so I vote for the flexible needle. Now, I had not yet made my lace transfer this row because it's easier to see what I'm doing before the stitches get moved around. Not that the lifeline was going into this row, but see how it kind of closed up my working spaces? I can do it being the lace transfers afterwards with no inconvenience. Now I'm going to go ahead and knit a few more rows of this off camera. If you want to see how this lace is made, there's another video on that. Look for central double decreases. And when I come back, I'll have a few rows and we'll pretend I made a bad mistake, and we'll rip back and I'll show you how it works. Okay, here we go. Here's my mistake. Should have had a couple more eyelets in here, and I forgot. So here's how we would fix it using let's try to fix it using our lifeline. I took the work off the loom. Scary, I know. Let's see if I did this right. We will unravel all the knitting back to the lifeline. Even if I missed a stitch, catching one stitch would not be as complex as catching all of them. But look, they're all on there. So from that point, we can hang them back onto the loom before we pull out the lifeline. And try to keep your stitches straight. However, you can turn the stitch later, double checking after the lifeline is out, in case you got one on wrong. So I would focus more on getting them on at all and in the right order than on whether they are perfectly aligned. There is my eyelet coming up. I think this is right, but we will check them in a minute because we're almost ready to pull out that lifeline. Here we go. In real life, you wouldn't use this much extra. Everything seems to be on there and nothing seems to be twisted except I think my last stitch is a little bit split. Did you see that? And it was twisted. Now we got it right. And actually, these bars were up here, so I'll just replace them. And now we will be ready to knit a normal row. So that's how it works, and you can see how much better this would be than ripping out the entire project. Also, this is a very simple lace pattern. Alternately, the rows do one of two things. Many are much, much more complex. So the majority of knitters like to use the same spot in the repeat every time they insert a lifeline. A variation on the lifeline is to use a circular needle. Even if you don't hand knit, you might want to get some inexpensive ones. Sometimes you can work it in itself. This one would probably go working in behind, in the row behind the one that's up here. If it will not go, use the traditional lifeline, but if you have to rip back to it, I like to hang the stitches on this from the yarn lifeline because from this is a little bit thicker and it's so much easier to put them back on the loom. You may not find it worth the trouble. Everybody's style differs, but I think the circular needle's a pretty big help here.